Welcome everyone to our very first leadership forum of the year, and happy Patriot Day. It's a great day to remember and reflect on 9/11. Think of the great freedoms we have as a country and also on the men and women that are serving to fight for liberty. We are really excited to get started with our Focus Friday Leadership Forum this week. For those of you that are maybe new to the business school and don't know what the leadership forums are, it's a neat opportunity that we have almost every single Friday to learn from leaders in business. This week we have the opportunity to learn from Dean Anderson and, Dean Patel. I've been involved with the leadership forums since my freshman year. I went to my first one, trying to think, and I worked these last two. And there's lots of experience, even though lots of them will be online this year. There's still so many things that we can learn from people coming in. They set good examples for us, good models for us to follow. And so it's going to be a good year, even if it has to be virtual for some of it. So without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Dean Anderson and Dean Patel. We're excited to have them here, and make sure you give them a warm welcome.
Thank you.
So we've got a little bit of a short time, so let me just set up a little bit of the intro about Dean Anderson. Like a lot of you, like me, Dean Anderson is an Aggie and went to Utah State and studied economics and political science here at Utah State. And after graduating, and we'll get into a little bit about this through the questions, went on to have a great career in academics and in business. The theme of this venue is leadership. And so let me just start off, Doug, if I may.
Sure.
Why does leadership matter? Why do we care?
Well, Dave, first of all, thanks for inviting me today. And hello, everybody. Glad to see you all here today. And to those who are joining us by Zoom, thanks for tuning in. You asked, why does leadership matter? I would say nothing of value gets done without leadership. It is the essential skill. And the good news is it's something you can learn. It starts with looking at the world as it is, not as you'd like it to be, and yourself as you are, not as you'd like to imagine yourself to be. In other words, you have to start with confronting reality. And then leadership imagines a world that never was. That is a positive difference from the current reality, and then engages others to work with you to make that positive vision a reality. So that to me is what leadership is all about. What do you think, Dave?
I would agree with all that, but before I answer on why I think leadership matters, let me just push you a little bit. So how do we confront reality? How do these students confront reality of masks and social distance? But on the other side of that, also, you said, once you confront reality, you also have to have essentially imagination. What could be?
Right.
So if you're a freshman, sophomore, or undergraduate student here, like these students are,
right.
How do you confront the reality of social distance and masks and all the things that we're doing, Zoom classes? I didn't know what Zoom was 6 months ago, right? Did we? How do you confront that reality, but then have the imagination to lead through that?
Well, first of all, the students who are all here today have made a decision that they want to be here, or they wouldn't be here. They'd be doing something else, taking a gap year or something else. So the presumption I'm making is that our student body who are on campus are here because they want to be. That's the first and most important reality to face. The second reality is that there are real constraints in what this year is able to be. We're not going to be able to see the Aggies play football and beat BYU, which I really regret. There will always be challenges. This year is unique and different. We've never had this particular challenge in the last century. But it's not necessarily harder or more difficult than other years. I remember when I was a freshman in college, the first year I was a freshman in college, was right after the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. And a bunch of my friends were either being drafted or signing up to go over to fight in Vietnam. That was a reality too. My father's first year of college was the first year of World War II. So these, we kind of have been living in a golden era in the United States. And the fact of the matter is, life is tough and it's often unfair. But part of the leadership task is to recognize that and then say, okay, well, how can I rise above it? And how can I make the most of the experience that I'm going to have? So leadership in a personal way for a college student today is making sure that you get the very most out of the experience that you can. And recognize also that you own that experience, just like you own your future. You're really creating your future. And I think the good news is that there's enormous capacity of our students to do just that, to make this year a very, very positive experience.
I think in some ways what you're saying is that leadership involves responsibility.
It does.
And excuse me, my answer to why that leadership matters is that, right? Leadership is responsibility. Responsibility in some way for me translates to ownership.
Yeah.
You talked about students owning their education. When you're no longer a student, you own, right? You're responsible for your own actions. And that's what leadership is all about. That's how I would define it. And that's why it matters.
Yeah.
If we don't, each of us take responsibility for our own lives or for our own actions, then where are we? Then we're always blaming someone else, right?
Well, and Dave, I would also add that, as important as leadership is and how much it matters, the fact of the matter is it's scarce. It's a scarce commodity. We need more leaders in this country. It's one of the reasons I say the world needs more Aggies, because I believe firmly that leadership is part of the Aggie brand. And we're certainly working to make it even more so.
That's right. So let me shift a little bit to a little bit of biography. Your father was a great influence on you. You mentioned him a little bit earlier. Dean Anderson's father was a student body president here at Utah State University, and he was later president of the faculty senate at USC, and was also mayor of Logan. Lots of leadership positions. So what did you learn from him and from your mom?
Well, there is a good chance that my mother is watching this. So I want, first of all, to give a shout out to my mother, who was the queen of the 1947 Centennial Ball here at Utah State University, and was a great influence. My father had passed away 10 years ago. My mother is 94 and a half. She'll be 95 in January, and she's doing really well. So hi, Mom. Love you. Dad was a remarkable individual in many, many ways. He was a very high energy fellow. He was the first member he was a first generation college student. His father and mother did not go to college. His father was the first member of his family born in the United States. Their family was all immigrants from Norway. And Dad lost his father at age 15 in the middle of the Great Depression, and formed a very strong personal identification with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president of the United States at the time. And I think President Roosevelt became something of a surrogate father for my father. And when I was born, I was the first child to be born to my mother and father. My mother and father named me Douglas Delano Anderson. And I sort of think that Dad would have named me Franklin Delano Anderson if Mother had allowed him to do that. So that sort of gives you something about the family relationship and orientation to politics that I had at a very early age. Dad went into the Army and came back from the Army and graduated here at Utah State, as you mentioned. then went down to USC and got a doctorate in public administration and joined the faculty there. And then in 1968, right after the Tet Offensive, he took a job with the US Agency for International Development in Vietnam as the principal advisor to the National Institute of Administration of the Republic of South Vietnam, which was building essentially the civil society and civil authorities in the Republic of South Vietnam. Because he was going into a war zone, mother and dad decided that it was time to move the family home to Cache Valley. They always referred to Cache Valley as home. And so they built a home down across the tennis courts, the street right across the street from the tennis courts at Central Park. And that's where mother and dad lived throughout the remainder of his life, and mother still lives there. My father was a great influence on me in many ways. He used to say to us all that we needed to put forth our very best effort in everything that we undertook to do, that we might learn much and achieve well. That was a constant refrain in our family. He also said, do things while you're young. That left a very big impression. I could go on all day long talking to my father, but those are a couple of memories.
Put forth best effort is a great thing to learn and to teach young people. So thank you. So before you became dean here, you were on the faculty of the Harvard Business School, and then founded a consulting company with other Harvard Business faculty called the Center for Executive Development. And you work with some of the nation's top CEOs. What did you learn about leadership from them?
Well, two of them that I worked with that left quite an impression on me are Lee Iacocca at Chrysler and Ralph Larson at Johnson & Johnson. Iacocca, I started working for Chrysler in 1987 and worked with them for 5 years and had a chance to work closely with all the top officers of the company, including Iacocca. Iacocca was a tremendously charismatic person. I think probably there may not have been another person who could have helped Chrysler get out of bankruptcy in 1978 and 80 as effectively as Iacocca did. But when I started working with them, they were back on the ropes a little bit. He was very imaginative, very innovative, very high energy. Of course, he was responsible when he was at Ford for the Mustang. Some of you may have seen the movie recently, Ford versus Ferrari, which kind of gives you a little bit of sense of Iacocca's personality. He was always very, very gracious with me and very genuine. But like a lot of what I would call big L leaders, leaders with a capital L, as opposed to leaders with a lowercase l, and we can talk about the difference of those things. Like a lot of big L leaders, Iacocca had some hidden weaknesses associated with his strengths. And one of those hidden weaknesses was he could be very, very intimidating. And in fact, my job at Chrysler was to open up the clogged arteries of communication in that company because of his intimidation. They just had shut down and they were not speaking the truth to each other. And that was one of the reasons why they were drifting back in towards bankruptcy. So I had to work to help truth be told in the company and make it safe for people to confront reality. That was Iacocca. Let me just give you another quick story about Ralph Larson, who was the CEO that I worked with at Johnson & Johnson. He was a new CEO. He had taken over from a legendary CEO by the name of Jim Burke. Burke had been the CEO at Johnson & Johnson during the famous Tylenol disaster, where Tylenol was found to have been in several tablets to have been laced with cyanide in Chicago and some other places. People had died. At that time, they didn't have the tamper-proof bottles. And Burke had saved the company as a result of his ability to confront that reality and to treat it in a effective way. So Ralph Larson was the guy that replaced him. So he had a big job, big shoes to fill. And I remember one day we were having a private conversation. I asked him, "What is it that you admire most in the leaders at Johnson & Johnson?" And he rattled off 3 things right off the top of the bat. I mean, it's clear he had thought a lot about this. He said, firstly, performance. He said, we're a company that makes promises to Wall Street, and we expect people to perform. And so we want to be able to be credible about the promises that we make for performance. He said, now I will tell you that if you have difficulty in performing here in this company, you get a lot of help. And it's true. They had a great culture of decentralization and mentorship and support to help people grow and achieve and meet their objectives. So he says, you get a lot of help in performance. He said, more important than performance, however, is judgment, good judgment. He said, you can make a mistake, but just don't make the same dumb mistake twice. And then he told a story about Jim Burke that I've always found fascinating. He said, when Burke was a young guy coming up the ranks through Johnson & Johnson, he made a big mistake. It was like back in the early 60s, and it was a $10 million mistake, which back in those days was real money, like it's not today, right? And he was called into the office of the then chairman of the company, who was Robert Wood Johnson, who was actually a general during World War II. And from that time on, he always was referred to as General Johnson. Now you have to imagine going into the corporate headquarters office at New Brunswick, New Jersey, to see General Johnson, the son of the founder, whose name was on the company, and you've just made a $10 million mistake. So he goes in to see General Johnson. He walks into his office and he says, well, sir, I suppose now you'll want my resignation. And General Johnson looked at him for a moment in complete disbelief and said, your resignation? Why on earth would I want your resignation? I've just spent $10 million educating you. And Burke not only told, Larson not only told me that story, but he told that story all the time inside of Johnson & Johnson as a way to reinforce the notion that you can make mistakes, just don't make the same dumb mistake twice, and make sure that the company is getting value out of the failures that you're making. And then he said, but more important than judgment, good judgment, is trust, integrity. He said, there you don't get 2 mistakes. You make 1 mistake on trust or integrity and you're out of here. He said, we're a decentralized company. We're all over the world. We don't have time to go back around checking up on people. We expect total conformity to our values and to integrity. And so if you violate that, you're out. That sort of hierarchy of performance, judgment, and integrity and trust always impressed me. Now, Dave, before you ask another question, I want to ask you a question, because we've talked a little bit about my biographical background and some of the early lessons I've learned from leaders I've worked with. And I'm sure we'll talk about more of those. But I want to ask you, Dave, you are a first-generation college student, just like my father was. You're the first person in your family, first generation of your family to have come to the United States. Your parents came here from India. Mm-hmm. I believe you were about 10 years old when you did. What was that like for you? And what was the early leadership lessons that you got in your home?
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's right. So I'm a first generation immigrant, first generation college student. How many first generation college students here? That is great.
That's terrific.
Great to see that.
That's great.
I think for me, so we came from India when I was 10 years old into Salt Lake City, Utah, right?
From Ahmadabad.
So you say, well, why of all the places, right? If you're going from India, why would you go to Salt Lake City, Utah, and not to, right? Immigrants usually go into larger metropolitan areas, right? You go to New York, you go to Los Angeles, whatever that is, right? And it's a classic tale of immigrants the world over, which is you go where you know somebody, right? If you don't know anything about the country, you're going to go, oh, I know somebody there. I don't care about the rest of what it looks like. I know somebody there, right? So we came here because my uncle, my dad's brother, had come here to go to school. And so they lived in Salt Lake. And so that's where we ended up. And so that's where we ended up in Utah, of all places. And I have to say, so this was late 70s, early 80s, Utah was different than now, in the sense that what you have all grown up with, the Silicon Slopes and the huge economic development along the Wasatch Front, did not exist, right? There was actually towns, then wide open spaces, then towns, and not just this megalopolis from Ogden to Spanish Fork that a lot of us who are from Utah understand. That also means there weren't a lot of people who looked like me when I was growing up, right? But having said all that, it was an amazing experience growing up here. And that's what I would take away. That's what I've taken away. That's what I try to tell my kids. That's what I would ask all of you to think about, right? There are great people everywhere. And if you have a positive attitude about life, lots of people want to help other people. I think that's just a natural human instinct. So rather than focusing on differences, right? I never thought of myself as different because the people I was around never looked at me as different. Even though on the exterior, you'd say, well, you don't look like anybody here. They never treated me like that. And so I never treated them like that. And it turned into just an amazing life here in Utah.
Yeah.
And so that's been a huge lesson for me,
Yeah.
right? Treat people as individuals, because that's how I'd want to be treated.
That's a great lesson. Dave, you were also an athlete. Talk a little bit about leadership lessons that you developed as a result of being an athlete.
So yeah, so I was a student athlete in high school and at Utah State. And I was just having a conversation with somebody this week that, when I hire, I have a bias for hiring other student athletes. And you say, why is that? And to me, I think in its purest form, competition teaches you a lot about yourself, right? And so for me, just as a personal experience, what it taught me is that you fail, right? If you're in whatever, let's just talk about sports for just a second, whatever sport that is, right? There's a winner and a loser. I ran track, right? So there was one person who won and everybody else who didn't win, right? Whatever that is you do. You talk about Tom Brady, maybe the best football player, and I'm not a Patriots fan, best football player of our time, right? He has lost more games than he's won, right? And so athletics to me teaches you about failure. And that's a fundamental fact of life, right? We don't all win at every single thing we do. People who work for me, I think, get tired of me saying this, right? The perfect is the enemy of the good. Mm-hmm. Meaning that if you look at sports, like no one wins every single game. And to me, that's what athletics teaches. That's what it taught me. So that in life, so in school, when I did bad in a test, which I did a lot, right? Or I didn't get good grades, and I didn't get a lot of good grades, right? Got a lot of bad grades. Your life just doesn't break apart, right? You learn from that and you get up and you try to do better the next time, because that's what sports taught me, right? I lost today's race. Well, there's going to be another one next week. And so I'm going to have to get better if I don't want to lose again.
Can we just say, though, that it also teaches you that winning is sweet? So talk about watching Sam Merrill drill that three-pointer at the Mountain West Championship. You were there.
I was there. I was on the fifth row in Vegas, the last big party, right? That was literally the last big party, and then Corona, right? So I haven't traveled since then. I think there are a few things that are, or if there's nothing, right, really better than that, right? What Sam did is like the pinnacle from that environment. I think we can take that lesson, right? Not all of us are going to be a basketball player who hits the game-winning shot at exact time when it counts. But I think we can all take a lesson from that to say, that's what we're training for. Sam, if he were here today, would say every single minute that he spent in his 25 years, however old he is, on the court when no one was watching and practicing and practicing and practicing was to lead up to that moment when he wanted the ball
Yeah.
with time expiring, knowing that I'm going to make it and then to make it, right? There's nothing better than that. But what we see is that, right? What I saw was that. And I think whenever those of us who were there watch video of that, you still get emotional. It was so phenomenal, that moment. But what we don't see, and I think that's also instructive, what we may see are the outward measures of that success. And what you don't see is the hours and years of work it took to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a great lesson.
Yeah, it is. That's a great lesson.
So let me shift a little bit, Doug. So we've recruited some amazing faculty just this year,
Yeah,
and to teach specifically about leadership.
we certainly did.
And our audience may not know about Dr. Susan Madsen
Right.
and about Boyd Craig and about Lord Dr. Michael Hastings.
I knew you were going to ask me about this, and so I've asked my staff to be able to show their pictures on the screen. So the screen right now is showing Susan Madsen. Susan Madsen is the founder of the Utah Women in Leadership Project. She is the foremost authority on women in leadership in the state of Utah. And this project's been going on for about 10 years. And Susan is absolutely ubiquitous. I mean, if you start paying attention to stories about women in leadership and girls in leadership in the state of Utah, almost all of those stories have Susan as a source. And so she's now the Karen Haight Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership here. And we're just absolutely delighted to have her a member of this faculty. Lord Michael Hastings is someone that we gave the first ever Stephen R. Covey Principle-Centered Leadership Award to last year. He is a member of Parliament in Great Britain. He is a member of the House of Lords in Great Britain. And he's an extraordinary individual. I met him for the first time last year when he was here to accept that award. And then I followed up and joined with some of our students last spring break in the first week in March over in Great Britain. And Lord Michael Hastings was a great partner in helping us set up visits, and he took us through Parliament. We went to KPMG, where he was a former officer of the company and head of their Global Citizenship Initiative. He took us to some private nonprofits that are working with leadership and with public efforts in Great Britain. And we also went to Regents University, which is in Regents Park. And he is the chancellor of Regents University, which means he's the titular head of Regents University. Well, we've been recruiting for another endowed professorship we have here, which is the Stephen R. Covey Endowed Professorship of Leadership. And we asked Lord Michael Hastings to become the first incumbent of that role. And he said, I'll do it if I can share the role with Boyd Craig. And that's the next person I want to introduce you to. Boyd Craig is the head of an organization called Leader in Me. It's a nonprofit. He's working with literally millions of school-age children around the world to help them develop their leadership ability using the ideas of Stephen R. Covey. And Boyd, for 25 years, was Stephen R. Covey's closest aide at the Covey Leadership Center and subsequently Franklin Covey, and helped co-write many of his books. And Boyd is a great leader in his own right. And he and Lord Michael Hastings are sharing the Stephen R. Covey Endowed Professorship. And part of their role and responsibility is to help us really launch the Covey Leadership Center here at the Huntsman School. So these are three outstanding new faculty members at Utah State. And both Boyd and Lord Michael Hastings will be co-teaching a leadership course in the spring.
It's fantastic. So we've got about 10 minutes before we wrap up. So let me ask a couple of final questions. The school, of course, is named the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and we're sitting in Huntsman Hall. So, and you've had a long relationship with Mr. Huntsman. How did he define leadership?
Well, let me tell you how I viewed John Huntsman as a leader by not only how his words, but also his actions. Right outside this Perry Pavilion is what we call the Huntsman Library. It's basically designed to help all of our students get to know Mr. Huntsman and his personal qualities. There is a sign right outside that says, a quote from Mr. Huntsman that says that there is no finer, I'm paraphrasing, but there is no finer human activity than to reach down and lift another up. And that's really how John felt about leadership, that it was really an opportunity to contribute and to serve, rather than to sort of be somebody that people would pay attention to. It was, what can I do to contribute and serve and help lift somebody else up? John was a student leader in Palo Alto. He was president of his student body class at Palo Alto High School. And he was at home one day on a weekend, and he got a phone call from his principal who said, John, we have a gentleman here from a company called Crown Zellerbach, and he's in the company of an administrator at the University of Pennsylvania. They'd like to meet some outstanding student leaders. Would you mind coming down and visiting with him? It turns out it was an interview. John really didn't know it at the time, but he was being interviewed for a full scholarship at the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton. He had never heard of Wharton before, but it changed his life. And he ended up graduating from Wharton at the top of his class, not so much because of his outstanding academic achievements, but because of his outstanding leadership capacity. And one of the things that John has had from the very beginning is an orientation to giving back and contributing to others. When he didn't have any money at all as a high school student, working to help support his family because his father was a graduate student at Stanford in education, he would bring the janitors up from the high school up on the stage at the end of the year in their award ceremony, and give him the best gift that he could afford at the time, which was a necktie. When John passed away a few years ago, I asked his family if I could have one of John's neckties, and I proudly wear it. His focus on hard work, integrity, taking the initiative, getting action done, making great things happen that wouldn't have happened without him. That's John Huntsman. And infused in all of it is an incredible orientation to contribution and philanthropy. John cared a lot about making money, but he cared about it because it made him capable of contributing to the lives of others in a deeper way. And he used to say to Peter Huntsman, who runs Huntsman Corporation, that his job was to make enough money so that he could give it away. And he was very sincere about that, very, very sincere. One little anecdote about John Huntsman that is told in his book is he came close to bankruptcy on 3 different occasions. And one of those times was around the year 2000 and 2001. He had made big commitments to the Huntsman Cancer Institute, annual commitments of pledges of contributions. And the company wasn't churning out the money at that time because it was close to bankruptcy. Well, he went to his bankers in New York and to secure a personal loan so that he could make his contribution that year. His banker said, "Are you nuts? Nobody does that." But John Huntsman did. It's an extraordinary story.
That's a great story. I think that's a great wrap up. So let me just, what we've heard, at least what I've heard and what I've been writing down as Dean Anderson's been talking is, here are the leadership lessons I've gotten. He learned from his dad to put forth his best effort, right? From Ralph Larson at Johnson & Johnson about performance, judgment, and integrity, right? And then from Mr. Huntsman, amongst lots of other things, that leadership is about lifting somebody else up, right? It's about contribution. It's about giving back. I know that Mr. Huntsman signed, and I forget the name of the pledge that they've signed, but essentially to give away.
The Giving Pledge, it's
The
called.
Giving Pledge, to give away either more than half or all of.
It was 50% when Warren Buffett and Bill Gates said it, and John said, "I think we ought to make it 80."
So the Giving Pledge is that you pledge to give away 80% of everything you've made, right? So he not only talked about it, he lived that leadership principle that he believed in, right? And I think that would be the really what leadership lesson would be, is you don't just talk about these things, right? Ralph Larson didn't just talk about performance, judgment, and integrity, he lived it.
He lived it.
And John Huntsman didn't just talk about that leadership is about giving back, he lived it, right? And I hope that's what whatever leadership lessons you develop in your life, that you actually truly believe them and you do those. That's in the end more important, right? There's lots of schools of leadership, lots of advice that you're going to get about leadership and what it means. And I think it means different things to all of us. I think the more important thing is that you believe that, and then that you do that. You practice it on a day-to-day life. I think we've got some announcements from our business center here, Brock Hardcastle. So Brock, I'm going to turn this over to you.
We've got one question from our viewers on YouTube, so we're wondering if we can answer this one quick. But it says, what is the best way to adapt to the unexpected, and how do unexpected changes affect leadership? This is from Aubrey Williams from YouTube. So we have time to answer this really quick, and then we can get to more announcements.
Well, I'll give you my shot, and then I'd like to hear what Dave has to say about it. But there's a doctrine in military history that says that you plan for the encounter with the enemy in detail up to the very first moment of first engagement with the enemy, and then you do the right thing, whatever that is. It's the idea that we do need to be planful, but we also need to be flexible, because a lot of the world, resides in what I call the exterior uncontrollable box. I mean, it comes at you, just like this COVID thing came at us, and nobody planned on that. So you have to be adaptable and flexible, and you have to have a mindset that says it's okay to pivot. It's okay to look at the challenge that's blowing you off course as a potential opportunity. Stephen R. Covey, who was for the last 2.5 years of his life professor here at Utah State University, had a great aphorism. He said, we need to learn to live, to love, to learn, and to leave a legacy. Those are 4 deep human needs that all of us have. If you think about to live means that the physical aspects of life are being taken care of. To love, a sense of belonging, the social, emotional aspects of life. To learn, that's the mental aspects of life. And to leave a legacy, that's all about the spiritual aspects of life. And if you think about all of those things as being integrated, then when stuff happens and it blows you off course, you still have what Covey would call a true north. Think about it as if you were sailing a ship and the ship got blown off course. Well, as long as you know where true north is, you can navigate back to it. You can pivot back towards true north. That's what we all ought to be looking for in terms of our own personal leadership style, finding what true north means to us. And when we find it, it will unlock enormous energy and commitment.
I don't know if I can really beat that. I would say that, you know, as long as you have that true north, whatever that is for us, that's going to help us navigate however we're buffeted by life, right? I would just leave you, and I won't spend too much time on it. I'll have you figure out what this really means. But one of the things that stuck with me from a guy named Mark Andreessen, who's a big Silicon Valley entrepreneur, he's famous for saying strong views, lightly held, right? And there's a lot of ways you can take that, but really, so I believe in what I believe in until facts dictate otherwise. So until things happen. So today, right, it's September 11th, and we could spend hours on that, right? My wife and I were in DC on the 9/11,
Oh,
right,
yeah.
19 years ago.
Were you working at the Pentagon then?
I was not at that point, but my wife worked a block from the White House, right? And we could talk about that forever, but right, so strong views, lightly held. Life was going on, and then all of a sudden this thing happened, right? And so you confront that reality with this new set of facts, lightly held, so that you don't just hold on to, well, this was the world. Well, if you just hold on to, world changed. So strong views, lightly held, you confront that reality, a new set of facts, and then you adapt to where you have to go to. As long as you have your true north, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. So in the end, integrity,
Right.
your personal integrity is what keeps you from being buffeted by whatever life deals you. Right.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you very much, I should say, Dean Patel and Dean Anderson, for your words today. I'm sure we can all agree that we enjoyed listening to both experiences from people that you learned leadership from, as well as your personal leadership as you've gained more experience in your lives.
Thank you, Brock.
So this is the conclusion of our leadership forum. So those of you that have been tuning in online, thank you so much for being here. We do have 2 great events these next 2 Fridays coming up, starting with next week, the She's Daring Mighty Things Summit. That will be online. And then the week afterwards, we'll have the Huntsman Career Expo, which will also be on an online format. You can find out more information for these on the Huntsman website and checking the Huntsman calendar. So thank you all for tuning in.